What's a sign that someone is totally messed up? When literally everyone says something's wrong with them, or they're weird / off. Had this happen with a guy friend I knew since childhood. My family was weary of him, even as a child, but I always felt people needed to give him the benefit of the doubt, as he was always nice, affectionate, and respectful towards me. Then as we grew older, I'd have female friends say the same thing when he'd show interest in them, yet still never saw him as messed up, just him a little awkward. Long story short, I came to the realization he had followed me around gathering information on me for years, while he'd literally be in relationships, and actually ended up stalking me once I moved away and got engaged. Lesson learned: when others see it, pay close attention and don't dismiss it. It's interesting how we often ignore warnings from others. You had a deeper connection with him, so it's understandable you didn't see those red flags at first. It's a tough realization when someone you trusted turns out to have harmful intentions. It's crucial to listen to instincts and what others say, even if it feels uncomfortable. Trusting your gut can sometimes help you spot things you might otherwise overlook. They're perpetually angry, never at peace. They loathe their job, their home, their marriage. It's like they think that once they hit 30, a mansion will magically appear, along with a high-rise office, a sleek car, and a partner who's like a sex expert. They've always got someone or something to blame, whether it's a spouse, a child, or a teacher who stifled them when they were little. They speak boldly, but when their views aren't popular, they immediately backtrack, changing their position just to be accepted, more concerned with approval than authenticity. They've bent over backwards for their boss, desperate for a small raise, but they can almost taste their boss's breakfast. They only know how to scream at others or go completely mute, drowning in self-pity. "Oh, poor me," they say. This person seems stuck in a cycle of dissatisfaction. They can't find peace or fulfillment, always looking for something or someone to blame. Their expectations about life and success seem unrealistic, hoping for quick fixes that don't come. Instead of owning their feelings, they shift blame and seek approval, which leads to more frustration. It's a tough situation, just a lot of conflict without any real resolution. I just left this post, and the next one I saw was a video of a woman recording her children's reaction to the election. So I came back to contribute. They started hyperventilating and crying. I don't care what your political views are, it doesn't matter. Do not inject children with your own fears. Theft to the when I was a kid, we all know not one child growing up here is that deeply into politics that it elicits a disruptive physiological stress response. It's 100% just the parents scaring their kids for internet clout and money. It's gross and heartbreaking. Children should be protected. I'm not saying stick their heads in sand, but don't bomb them with existential crises either. They just got here. It's pretty disturbing how some parents use their kids for attention online. The reactions kids have can be a direct result of what they're exposed to at home. They shouldn't be put through that kind of stress just for views. Kids deserve to feel safe and enjoy their childhood without having to deal with adult fears. There are healthier ways to engage them in the world around them. One time I worked at a grocery store. An old lady in the liquor store fell and hit her head. Heavy alcoholism withdrawal. I alone helped hold her neck and head in place while she had a seizure and foamed at the mouth. Once we got something under her head to straighten her neck, everyone realized my hand was dripping with blood from her open skull. I continued to tell her to breathe until the EMTs were ready to take over. I knew I had to get an emergency shot to prevent STD chances and told my boss I was going immediately. People asked how I didn't freak out and knew what to do. Not even my top 10 scary moments in my life. When someone is unfazed by emergencies, it should tell you they've been in those situations before in their private lives. I might be fucked up, but I'm not letting my fear or panic lead to anyone else dying. That sounds intense. Helping someone in that condition can be really overwhelming, but it seems like you handled it well. It's interesting how some people stay calm in emergencies, probably because of past experiences. Not letting fear take over when someone's in danger is important. It's clear you had your priorities straight in that situation. That kind of composure can make a real difference. Low self-esteem. People with low self-esteem may be more likely to take things personally and may view criticism as confirmation of their shortcomings. Perfectionism. Perfectionists may take things personally because they are constantly worried that others are judging or criticizing them. Negative self-talk. Constantly telling ourselves we're not good enough or it's always our fault can make it easier to believe negative things said about us. Childhood trauma. Lack of emotional support in childhood and being blamed as a child can contribute to feelings that we deserve to be mocked or humiliated. Anxiety disorders. People with social anxiety may be extremely afraid of being judged and embarrassed. Emotional sensitivity. Highly sensitive people may take things more personally. This makes sense. Low self-esteem and perfectionism can really skew how a person perceives criticism. Negative self-talk just adds to that negative feedback loop. Childhood experiences shape our reactions, often leading to deep-seated beliefs about ourselves. Anxiety can amplify those feelings, while emotional sensitivity can make it tougher to brush off what others say. It's a cycle that can be hard to break. Just some thoughts on the topic. Literally, my mom, 3 different therapists told her she needs to take accountability for literally giving me PTSD, and she would immediately fire the therapist and find a new one, then complain about how none of them were taking her side. Girl, all I asked for was, "I'm sorry for beating you." That's it. Not that difficult. What I ended up getting was, "I'm sorry you think I was such an awful parent," which is the equivalent of saying, "I'm trying to make you feel like I'm apologizing, but I'm not." That's rough. Sounds like you're dealing with a lot related to your mom and her inability to accept responsibility. It's frustrating when you're seeking genuine acknowledgement and get something vague instead. Therapy should help, but if she's not open to it, things are unlikely to change. You've clearly been through a lot, and it's understandable to want a real apology. Hope you find the support you need. Just to top up on this, empathy often gets used when we should use sympathy. Many people use the former when they should be using the latter. Sympathy is the feeling of concern for someone else's suffering, while empathy is the ability to share in their emotional experience. Both are equally valid, but it's easy to reach a level of empathy fatigue because empathy requires you to take on that person's pain or for you to put yourself in their world for a long period. Empathy fatigue can be mentally and physically exhausting, and I think a lot of people are dealing with this right now. While I agree with your statement, let's try to be sympathetic towards those who are low on empathy. We don't know what they have dealt with in life, and they might just not have any more gas in the tank. This makes a lot of sense. People often mix up empathy and sympathy, but they serve different purposes. It's true that constantly feeling for others can wear you out. Empathy can drain your energy if you're not careful. Understanding that some are just trying to cope is important. We should give them a break and not judge too quickly. Everybody has their own struggles that aren't always visible. I try to share this a lot because people want to believe in the good of others, so part of that is the belief that we all experience empathy, but that's not true. Empathy is not innate. Empathy is learned. It needs to be taught more. We almost all have the capacity for empathy, but it's not inherently in us, and if we don't teach our children to empathize, and trust me, most do not, we will just keep having a worse world. Parents from Gen X tend to rely heavily on schools to teach their children. If schools aren't teaching it, then it's harder to learn. Also, schools suck. At least back when I was in them 12 years ago. Please teach kids to empathize. Don't assume they already do. The idea that empathy needs to be taught is important. Relying too much on schools can lead to gaps in learning. Parents should actively help their kids understand empathy instead of expecting schools to handle it all. If we don't focus on this, future generations might struggle with understanding each other. It's about putting in the effort now to make things better later. Teaching empathy could really make a difference, especially when it comes to relationships, and not just romantic ones. The people I know who post the most about theirs are in the most turbulent relationships, but the same is also true with friendships and familial relationships. I knew this guy who was a drunk and was horrible to his mom, like talking shit about her, and to her constantly. But then on social media, it was all "my mom is my rock, my mom is the best mom ever," etc. I've seen it with friends who are on the outs with each other too. It's interesting how people present their relationships online. Seems like there's often a big gap between what's shown and reality. The ones who brag the most may be the ones struggling the hardest. It makes you think about how social media can create a false image of life and relationships, even with family. It's like people want to show the best parts but hide the chaos underneath. My mom uses Facebook like a personal diary that has the added benefit of endless validation from people who don't actually give a shit because they just want the validation of comment reacts. All day long she posts about her health and disabilities and my brother's POS dad. She sits on her phone literally all day long and has now developed agoraphobia. Won't go anywhere without a support worker. I blame the social media, but she blames other people for making her that way. She just seems so weirdly out of touch with reality, and she never used to be like that. She doesn't understand why it's hurtful for me to find out my pa has cancer from Facebook instead of telling me directly. Like what? Anyway, I do recognize the hypocrisy since I'm now airing my own dirty laundry sorta. My bad. The story was relevant. It sounds like your mom really got sucked into social media. It's kind of wild how that can change someone's perspective and behavior. Your frustration is valid, especially about learning tough news online. It's important for communication to be direct in family matters. You're aware of the irony, which shows you know where you stand. Just try to focus on what helps both you and your mom. Could be a number of things: neglect, abuse, being threatened for trying to communicate differences, or experiencing a series of setbacks when speaking with other people. Depends on what their environment at home and at school was like. Unfortunately, not a lot of people reach out or are even aware of what these people are going through. Sometimes, they assume the worst about them because they find their skittish behavior to be an incredibly uncomfortable experience dealing with it. That in turn can exacerbate their behavior further. If you're aware of it, you can try to mask it, though it isn't fun living like that at all. And I'm sure they probably do want help and support to get through the tough parts of life as best they can. The text highlights how external factors like neglect or abuse shape a person's behavior. It points out that many people may not understand or notice what others are going through. The cycle of misunderstanding can worsen the situation. Those affected might want support, but feel trapped in their circumstances. It's a complex issue that requires empathy and awareness from those around them. Ugh, this is a sister of mine. I can't look at her socials. It's just non-stop self-victimizing whenever a guy dares not to like her. I can't stand the smear campaign. The worst was when this guy she was obsessed with couldn't give her the attention she wanted anymore when his mom was in a coma. Of course, she's telling everyone he's the narcissist. Sure, he had his problems. He was an asshole before that happened. Not sure who would keep their cool in a time like that, though. I couldn't have done better in his shoes. I can't imagine how it felt to have your mom die that way, and then have your ex air you out like that. Repeatedly, throughout their on and off again relationship. So sad for them both. They'll both learn, I'm sure, what happened to using the internet to share cat videos. It's pretty messy. Your sister's behavior seems to be hurting both herself and that guy. People often struggle with their feelings in tough situations, and it's not easy to navigate relationships when emotions are high. The internet could definitely use more lighthearted content, like cat videos, instead of this drama. Seems like everyone gets caught up in their own stories, forgetting how it affects others. This is a phenomenon that has started getting attention on TikTok too. I saw a video of someone who watches a lot of cooking TikTok and noticed there are always a ton of comments from people saying they can't eat some of the ingredients. The internet has, for better or for worse, allowed people to engage with content that may have never been made for them, but due to doom scrolling and being chronically online, people believe that their feeds and the creators on them have been put there for their personal entertainment. It's just more main character syndrome. The idea that people think content is tailored just for them is interesting. It shows how the internet interacts with personal identity. Cooking videos should be for enjoyment, but the comments reveal a lot about broader perceptions. It seems like a lot of people are struggling to connect with content that doesn't fit their experiences. It's just culture adapting to new platforms and habits. Well, the issue you're running into is that manipulative people will go as far as they can to manipulate. That includes the standard manipulation tactics, never admitting fault or responsibility, and then feigning victim by calling the other person a manipulator. This thread is still important because people still need to be aware of the standard manipulation tactics in the first place. But you're right, the next most important thing is not letting yourself be gaslighted into thinking you're the manipulator. This topic highlights how some people twist situations to avoid accountability. The key takeaway is understanding manipulation tactics to protect yourself. It's also crucial to stand your ground so you don't fall for their mind games. Staying aware helps in navigating these interactions better. Refusing to apologize is absolutely a bigger issue than a lot of offenses people would need to apologize for. It's like telling someone you don't think they're worth the gesture to their face. I had a 15-plus-year-long friendship get destroyed because the guy couldn't apologize to me. Anytime I even remotely offended him, I would apologize, and he'd refuse to accept it until I'd apologized repeatedly. But when he had cause to apologize to me, he wouldn't. I walked in on him and another person we know shit-talking me. I was upset, and he owed me an apology. He sent a written non-apology apology, which was as close as I figured he could get, but then he deleted the message and took a stance of, I never should have sent that because I didn't do anything wrong, and if you think I did, then you are the problem. So, I told him that if he felt that way, then I didn't want to associate with him anymore. As if I'm not worth even one apology, then he sees me as less of a person than he sees himself. He told me that's fine. Boom, 15-plus years of friendship gone. I haven't spoken to him in nearly 4 years. Yeah, it sounds like a tough situation. Friends should be able to apologize and communicate openly. It's messed up when one person can't admit their faults, especially after being close for so long. It's disappointing to see a long friendship end over something like this. Just shows how important respect and acknowledgement are in relationships. 4 years of silence is significant. You made a choice that worked for you in the end. Some of the qualities described above line up with avoidant or dismissive avoidant patterns of behavior. initially seeking out intimacy with a lot of eagerness, but then getting intimidated by escalating intimacy and abruptly breaking loose, and or being uncomfortable giving consistent affection and care to others, getting into hot and cold, or push and pull cycles rather than steady and consistent intimacy, etc. Sometimes avoidant people can really hurt others by being dismissive or coming across as uncaring when they abruptly get scared or overwhelmed by intimacy, and sometimes they may get defensive when confronted with these patterns. Not all of the characteristics above line up with avoidant/dismissive avoidant attachment, but some of them do. It sounds like you're talking about some common behaviors in avoidant attachment styles. People can struggle with intimacy and may pull away when things get too close. It can definitely be confusing for both sides when someone seems warm one moment and distant the next. It's not easy to deal with these patterns, especially when they don't always match up perfectly with how someone feels or acts. Self-awareness and accepting your feelings really helps. I have rejection-sensitive dysphoria. I think I must have developed a lot of coping mechanisms for that over the years without dealing with the root cause, but during the past couple of years I found myself in a consistent environment where I can't use those coping mechanisms, or where they don't work. So I had to dissect the problem and figure out where these thoughts and this extreme sensitivity were coming from. It has not cured the feelings, but when I have them, I can think to myself, this is rejection-sensitive dysphoria that you're probably having for XYZ reason. Talk to a sympathetic friend about the situation until you can gather enough information to realize that you have not been rejected, because you most likely have not been. That has helped me a bit. I still feel upset and crazy and derailed in the moment, but it helps keep my actions in check. It sounds like you've been on a journey to understand your feelings better. It's interesting how recognizing those patterns can provide some clarity, even if it doesn't completely change how you feel. Talking it out with friends seems like a smart move too. It's tough when coping mechanisms stop working, but at least you're finding new ways to deal with things. That's progress, even if it feels small right now. TikTok calls it the bean soup theory. A woman posted a video of her favorite bean soup recipe. She then received comments saying, "But what if I don't like bean soup?" The theory is that social media has killed comprehension skills, which used to be almost basic common sense. Instead of going, "I don't like bean soup, so I will ignore this," people now expect an alternative bean soup recipe for those who don't like bean soup as well. For the reason you stated. Edit, bean soup, not pea soup. The bean soup theory highlights how social media may have affected common sense. Instead of simply moving on when they don't like something, people seek alternatives or solutions. It's interesting how expectations have shifted over time in online interactions. It makes you think about what else has changed in communication. Bean soup or not, the focus on accommodating everyone seems to take precedence.